Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for the tour of a turbulent horizon, Lamis. I got to thinking when I saw my longtime collaborator Ron Mackay come in from Scotland. He and I became involved in this cause. I know we don't look it now more than 40 years ago, and I couldn't help, as I listened to you, Lamis, compare one of the many changed facts on the ground. When Ron and I, in the mid-1970s, went to the Middle East, Lebanon to be precise, Beirut, to learn more and commit ourselves more to this cause, almost everybody in the Middle East supported the Palestinian cause. But here in Britain, from which we had come, hardly anybody supported the Palestinian cause. You could have fitted easily, with room for a few elephants at the back of the hall, every supporter of the PLO in 1975 into this room, with a lot of space to spare. Indeed, it was an intensely controversial thing to do in 1975, to say that you were a supporter of the PLO. And now we have almost the opposite situation. Almost everybody in Britain, the United States, now at least accepts, if they don't support, the centrality of the Palestinian issue, the essential point that without justice for the Palestinians there can be no peace in the region and therefore the world, whilst in the Arab countries the Palestinians are quite abandoned, about which more later. A lady from one of 3 television stations filming this meeting asked me before we began what we were calling for to happen. What was the purpose of this meeting? Well, the purpose of this meeting is to say that for us, the Palestinian issue cannot be separated from the great issues now gripping the world of instability and insecurity and the swirl of dangerous events which imperils all of us. What we're demanding is simple: that our governments and the international community, as they like to call themselves, live up to their responsibilities as powers. For the United Nations to live up to its responsibility. For the governments of the world who have a legal responsibility to protect the people of what is an internationally recognized illegally occupied territory. This is important because we live in a world where our governments are ready to move heaven and earth, threaten war against people who behave illegally, seize territory illegally, where Russia, for example, is currently under intensifying economic sanctions because the people of Crimea voted to leave the Ukraine and return to Russia. So unacceptable is this in the modern age that all the governments of the European Union, choreographed by the government of the United States, has imposed very powerful and stringent sanctions against the government of Russia. Iran has just emerged from a long period, and may not have entirely emerged, from a long period of international sanction, ostracism, and the daily threat of war against it. And it didn't even occupy anybody else's country. Didn't even have weapons that are banned under international law, yet was sanctioned and threatened nonetheless. It's vital for people to grasp, that's why I mentioned, gave away my age, how long this has been going on. The Palestinians of Nablus, from which Lamis springs, have been living under illegal military occupation, brute force occupation, since 1967, when the Beatles were at the top of the charts, and the Beatles are 40 years dead. And Nablus and all the other towns and cities are still under the same illegal military occupation, except it's gotten much, much worse over the years. I used to travel regularly in the West Bank, in Jerusalem and Gaza. I can't any longer. I'm banned by Israel from entering the West Bank. I'm banned by the government of Egypt from entering Egypt and therefore Gaza. And Jerusalem, of course, is entirely out of bounds. But in those days, on my first visit, 1979, to what we still call, the occupied territories, the occupied West Bank, I was able to drive around all day and every day, one end of the West Bank to the other. And more importantly, so were the Palestinians. Now there are hundreds of checkpoints. The apartheid wall, only what did you say, 30% complete. Another 70% to go. And settlements intensifying with a settler population of hundreds of thousands of people. And here I want to deal with an issue of nomenclature. When I hear the word settlement, I don't know about you, I think about log cabins, covered wagons, heroic frontier spirit of people just pushing the frontiers, pushing the edges of human existence. These settlements are cities. They are cities like Beverly Hills in some cases. Ma'ale Adumin, the biggest settlement, very near to Jerusalem, is a city of Western proportions where people frolic in fountains and swimming pools on green lawns that are continually sprinkled, all of it using stolen Palestinian water, while the Palestinians, whose water it is, whose land it is, go without. And when I hear the word settler, ditto. These people are not settlers. These are not settlements. These are cities built by thieves on stolen land. And that's what we should call them. They're not settlers, they're land thieves. And here's the problem. I hope, disarm interviewers by putting it this way. If somebody stole your house, God forbid, and you had to go and live on a piece of rough land, in a tent, in a refugee camp, for how long would you continue to demand your house back? I say forever, and your children after you. Because every day that you wake up in your new situation as a refugee, as a displaced person in your own land, or even worse, in other lands nearby, you are literally or metaphorically looking at your own house, your own garden, your own trees, and watching someone else who already had a house, who came from Brooklyn. Almost certainly, if you'll forgive me, I know that's where you're from nowadays too.
They're the most violent.
They're the worst.
No, it's true.
They've brought Brooklyn to the Palestinian land. They already had a house in Britain, or in Russia, or in France. They had lives. Nobody was bothering them. The problem is they've gone to somebody else's land and stolen their house. And they wonder why people are resisting. The only wonder is that the resistance is not total, always 24/7 for every single year since 1967. That's the only thing to be surprised about. And if these people are not settlers, these are not settlements, if they are thieves living on stolen land, the right of the person whose land it is to resist them is absolute, absolutely legal, and absolutely moral. I just looked at some of the rushes from the film on Tony Blair that we've made that's coming out very soon. I saw Tony Blair in the refugee camps filled with Kosovan refugees saying that international law and international morality would never rest until every single Kosovan was allowed to return to their land and their home. If true for Kosovans, why not then true for Palestinians? Why is the victim of this great crime called the terrorist, and the terrorist who perpetrated this great crime called the victim of terrorism? We rejected at the door one of the main Zionist agitators in London who wanted to come in here. If he had come in here, he would have, in his inimitable style, accused us of sympathizing with terrorism, when in fact the people who are facilitating this terrorism are the supporters of Zionism and the supporters of this illegal entity in the first place. So what are we asking? We're asking our government to stop treating the victims as the baddies and stop treating the perpetrators as the goodies. But that's the opposite of what our government is doing. Our government even changed the law to make it impossible for anybody to go to court and seek a judge's decision to issue an arrest warrant for suspected war criminals if they come into this country. This government is presently changing the law to make it illegal, imagine, for a council or any public body in Britain to make a decision not to purchase goods and services from this illegal settler state. How much more clearly can you identify yourself with the criminal and therefore against the victim? And here's our problem, specifically British problem. We are the author of this entire disaster. I was going to call it a tragedy, but it's not a tragedy, it's a disaster. It's a man-made disaster, and it was made in London, made in the building that I sat in for 30 years. I used to walk past the very room where Balfour, 99 years ago, promised on behalf of one people to a second people the land that belonged to a third people. Unique, even by imperialist standards. We didn't even possess the land. We were giving away to a people who, by the way, at that time overwhelmingly rejected the idea of Zionism. When Balfour made this declaration, he made it to a tiny group in 1917 who represented a mere scintilla of international Jewish opinion. Overwhelmingly, Jewish opinion at that time was on the left and wanted to be protected in their own countries rather than go to somebody else's country and cause misery for a century on top of them. So, on the eve of the Balfour Declaration centenary, we have a special responsibility towards the Palestinian people, and that has in part driven the more than 40 years now that I have been involved in this struggle. So we demand our own governments, we demand our governments in the international fora and the organs that we are a part of to do something to live up to their international obligations. At the very least, to stop selling weapons to this settler state, to stop strengthening this settler state, and if they won't boycott, divest, and sanction this settler state, at least allow the people to do so. If I'm the Mayor of London, it will be illegal for me, by the time of May, it will be illegal to refuse to buy Israeli goods and services. So let me tell you right now, David Cameron, if I'm the Mayor of London, I will buy no Israeli goods, no Israeli services, whether it's legal or whether it's illegal. But here I must turn, because the other part of my equation with which I began is this. As Lamis sketched this new situation in this winter of discontent that is taking shape, where young Palestinians, beholden to none of the existing political parties in Palestine, without direction, without leadership, are taking the matter into their own hands and rising up, as is their legal and moral right. Where are the Arabs? I'll tell you where they are. They're busily murdering other Arabs. They're busily trying to start a war between the Arabs and the Iranians. Instead of coming to the aid of the Palestinians, they're massacring the poorest Arabs of the lot in Yemen. Thousands of people in Yemen have been massacred relentlessly by Saudi Arabia and its grisly allies, all of them Arabs. Syria is being ripped to shreds. The ancient Arab capital of Syria, Bilad al-Sham, is being destroyed by Arabs, by Arab governments who can't rebuild the destroyed houses in Gaza, but have limitless, absolutely limitless budgets for destroying the buildings in Syria and the people in them. And not only are they doing that, but they are, as Lamis told you, openly now, openly belly dancing for Israel, normalizing their relations with a state that has committed crimes almost beyond enumeration against other Arabs, other Muslims. How can any Arab government have normal, even friendly relations with the state which is illegally occupying Al-Aqsa? They're forever telling us, some of them, how Muslim they are. Aren't they? Isn't that Saudi Arabia's point vis-a-vis Iran? We're the leaders of the Muslims, but you're belly dancing for a state that is occupying Al-Aqsa, from which the Prophet himself ascended to the heavens. How can this be explained? Never mind justified. Of course, they don't try to explain it or justify it. Some of them don't even have the guts to announce it. I was in a Gulf country a couple of years ago, and the lift opened, and out of the lift came Shimon Peres, the president of the settler state. And yet the Gulf country I was in officially had no relations whatsoever with Israel, except Israel's president was coming out of the lift in the best hotel in their capital city. There are kings of Arabia shopping in Tel Aviv. At least their wives are shopping in the malls in Tel Aviv. What kind of people are they? This Sisi, who we were told was the new Nasser, is shooting Palestinians across the fence in Gaza. A mentally ill man went into the water just a couple of weeks ago and was shot dead by Sisi's army. The man was mentally ill, had no idea what he was doing, but he was a Palestinian in Gaza and he was crossing the international border. I'm running out of time, so let me conclude before a Q&A, which I hope will mainly be directed towards Lamis. It's not every day that we have an activist from overseas of her stature. But let me conclude by saying this. I have seen many Palestinian leaderships come and go. Mahmoud Abbas is not the leader of the Palestinian people. Neither, for that matter, are the leaders of the other parties. The leaders of the Palestinian people are people whose names we don't know. They are the young people that are facing the guns and facing the awesome destructive power. Can you just imagine for a minute what life would be like if we were occupied here in London? If there were foreign tanks and armies everywhere, and our leaders were collaborating with that foreign power's occupation, were growing fat on the salaries and the expenses afforded to them, wouldn't we hope that our young people would not surrender, but would carry on that struggle that once we were proud to identify with? That's why the 153rd martyr of this Al-Quds Intifada, who fell today, Sarwar Ibrahimi, his parents are proud of him. I don't know the circumstances in which he was slain, but I can imagine them. Just like the previous 152, he was either mown down, shot down, beaten to death, lynched. They're even lynching Eritreans, thinking that they are Arabs. Or he died knowingly confronting those who stole his own land, stole his own house.
It's the anniversary of Tom Handel today as well. He died 12 years ago.
Tom Handel, a British hero, shot down by these brutes. We've had Rachel Corrie and other internationals who went there just to bear witness to what's going on and whose lives were brutally ended by these tyrants.
And the Brazilian guy.
I don't know the Brazilian. You mean the Italian one?
No, the Brazilian, they killed him in the underground.
Oh, in London, yes. That's a slightly different matter.
They thought he was an Arab.
They certainly did. But the children of Palestine are rising up, and their children, if necessary, will do the same. I used to believe, Ron will bear me out, that one day I'd make a kind of heroic entrance into liberated Jerusalem with the flags flying and people welcoming those of us who have identified with this struggle for so long. I no longer believe that that will happen. But my youngest child is here, 1.5 years old. My friend, Palestinian friend in the audience, when he saw him at a recent demonstration, he pinched his cheeks and said, "You, little Genghis Khan, you have to help us liberate Palestine. The Arabs will not do it. We need a Genghis Khan." Well, of course, there are Arabs and there are Arabs. These young martyrs, 153 of them, these young strugglers, thousands of them, all these people in Palestine that are defending their honor, defending their dignity and their land and their heritage, they are all Arabs. The kings of Arabia will pass. In fact, they're so old, they probably pass by 11:30, some of them. But this new generation of Palestinians, I'm sure, will liberate their country. And Lamis, with my little Genghis Khan, can enjoy that welcome in liberated Jerusalem. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you.